In today's Honey What's Cooking, we are making something very special. It's a plum pudding. It's a winter pudding. It's a seasonal thing. It just has some overwhelming number of ingredients, but trust me, this is the easiest thing one can ever do because there's hardly any cooking technique involved or hardly any cooking involved. It's just mixing, leaving it overnight, and then steaming it the other day. I will go over the ingredients. I will not be talking about the quantities. I'll mention them in the narrative, the description of the recipe. We have breadcrumbs. I'm using fresh breadcrumbs. If you want to use packaged dry breadcrumbs, that's fine too. Grated carrot, candied dry fruit, lemon juice, orange juice, and I've got 2 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar added to it. Balsamic vinegar adds some good tanginess and taste. I've got a tablespoonful of treacle, which is essentially a very dark caramel made out of burnt sugar. I'll try to fit in the recipe along with this. You can also get treacle from the market. I'm using butter. The recipes usually call for suet. I'm not using animal suet for preference reasons. We have butter, an apple, eggs, blanched almonds, allspice mix. I've added some cinnamon powder to it, dried cherries, raisins of your preference. You want to use currants, raisins, red raisins, golden ones, whichever you like, walnuts, black raisins, dark brown sugar, candied cherries. I've got lemon and orange peels candied. So this is all going to go into the plum pudding. I'm using cherries instead of plums because we do not have plums in season. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm not going to add the eggs to the mix. I will do that tomorrow morning. Leave it for a couple of hours before we start steaming the pudding. So what I'll do is I will just coarsely chop all these ingredients so they are not in it. So what we will do is that I will coarsely chop all these ingredients, just making sure that they're not very lumpy or in holes, as we have this candied fruit. So in addition to that, all we need to do tonight is kind of just mix it up in a bowl and leave it. The apple, of course, we are going to core and grate before we add to the pudding mix. So what I've done is I've just coarsely chopped all the fruit, the candied fruit, the raisins to smaller bits because these are going to sit and soak in liquid from the rest of the ingredients, and we do not want them to be clumped in one place. So just very coarse chopping, and yeah, not very fine. It just has to be smaller in size essentially. One thing I did forget to mention was almond flour. We will also be adding 2 tablespoons of almond flour to the rest of the ingredients before we mix. Now we are going to add everything in a mixing bowl, and as I told you that I've coarsely chopped the raisins and the cherries and all the nuts, and everything is ready. So we have the apple grated. We've added lemon juice to it. We will start by adding the candied fruits. You can do it any way you want to. The blanched chopped almonds, chopped walnuts, grated carrot, the cherries, coarsely chopped, of course, all the raisins. There we go. The black raisins, butter. It doesn't matter if it is lumped, clumped, as long as it is there, it'll take its shape and course. Cherries, dried cherries, allspice mix, cinnamon powder, almond flour, brown sugar, and we will be adding liquids to it, so it will be fine. Candied lemon and orange peels. Breadcrumbs. And now finally the orange juice and the balsamic vinegar. I will just save a little bit. I will add it to the treacle so that it gets a consistency that we can use to pour in to the rest of the ingredients. And finally the treacle. And now essentially all you have to do is you just give it a toss. Don't go by the looks of it. It will be sitting so overnight, and the raisins will soak in all the liquids from the sugar, the orange juice, balsamic vinegar, lemon juice, and the butter will kind of disintegrate and let itself into the rest of the ingredients. And before we steam the pudding, of course, we are going to add in more liquid, which will be lightly beaten eggs. So the pudding has been mixed and it's going to sit overnight, and then we will give it a couple of turns, and then finally tomorrow we will add in the eggs and put it to steam for several hours. So the pudding has been resting overnight, and we will now add in the eggs, 3 eggs, lightly beaten. And we did not add baking powder yesterday, so 3/4 of a spoon baking powder and 3 eggs lightly beaten. Just lightly beat the eggs. You don't have to whip them. Now just give it a good mix and leave it for about half an hour to an hour before we move on to finally steaming the pudding. Preparing the ramekins, lightly buttered the edges and the base. Parchment paper, one will go onto the base and the larger bit will come onto the top once the pudding goes in. And now we will just fill in the ramekins with the pudding. And remember, I have parchment paper at the base that will help us when we flip the pudding over once it's done. The puddings are now in the ramekins. We will be placing parchment on top of the pudding, just easy and loose. So before we place the puddings to steam, we will put a place of foil on the top layer, and we will just give it a pleat like so that when the pudding rises there is room. I just tied it not using a twine. I'm not creating a loop. What I've learned over the years is that you can actually lift the pot once it has steamed. You just have to have an oven mitt that will prevent you from burning. So I've got a cooking pot and I'm doing something from whatever I had. I've got 2 bowls inverted, placed onto the base of the cooking pot. There's already some hot water at the base. I will just place the ramekins on the pots that are there in the cooking pan, and now I'm just pouring some hot water. I'm pouring some hot water so that it is easier to come to a boil. I will just keep it at a level that it doesn't start touching the ramekins as such. And then the stove is already at a high. I'm trying to bring it at a boil, and then I will lower the heat. And this is going to cook for about good 5 hours at least, if not more. And in the meantime, of course, I'm going to keep the water topped up so that it doesn't dry. So it's almost been 2 hours and the pudding has been steaming, boiling, call whatever. I will just show you how it looks. So there you are. I did top up the water once, and it's doing good. So the puddings have been steaming for good over 5 hours, and it's time to take them out now. So with a mitt on, just gently lift the pudding and place it on a board to cool down. So we will untie the puddings, and as you saw, like, you really don't have to do the handle with the twine. It works well even without it. Just be a little bit careful. These have been steaming long, so you don't have to hurry it up. And there we go. Let's take a look. As you can see, it already appears to have cooked. And there we have it. Nice and done. So let's flip the pudding. You just run a knife around the edges. Although it's not sticking, but it always helps. And then you take a plate, place it over the pudding container, and you flip like so. Tap it gently, and the moment of truth. There we go. Nice and easy and good. So the good thing of placing a parchment at the bottom of the cooking pot, the pan in which you steam the pudding, it comes out nice and clean. The only thing might have been that so the plum pudding is ready. Time for a tasting. And I have served it with plain vanilla custard. There we go. This is cool. Get going.